Do you think that the government spending or pledging to spend £700 million on this gives you an indication that they are perhaps preparing for a very hard Brexit without a deal?
Well, they're certainly preparing for a hard Brexit because even if they get a deal, a lot of that infrastructure, a lot of the paperwork at borders is going to be necessary. Because remember, the kind of deal that Boris Johnson is trying to negotiate, one that might get rid of tariffs, but actually involves a whole load of other checks to ensure compliance with EU standards. So deal or no deal, this spending is necessary.
It seems a bit odd that at a time when our economy barely has a pulse anyway, that we should be putting up trade barriers when everyone else is hoping that they will disappear altogether.
Well, yes, but inherent in the decision to leave the European Union is to make trade with our nearest and largest trading partner more difficult than it is now. And this government has taken a particular approach by saying we refuse to be bound by EU laws. We are going to end free movement. That means that automatically we're outside the single market. The government has also said we don't want to be part of a customs union because we want to sign our own trade deals with other countries. And that implies a whole lot of friction in our trade with the European Union.
And just briefly on the negotiations, I mean, there's been a lot of fairly toxic noise coming out of Brussels and London, occasionally then the more positive notes. Do you think that they will eventually sign some kind of deal, by October?
If you force me to guess, I would say yes, there will be a deal. I think it will come in the autumn. I think by the autumn, as the clock is ticking down, as it always seems to do with Brexit, heads of state and government will get involved and the necessary trade-offs will be made. But again, it's worth bearing in mind there are deals, and this promises to be quite a thin deal that's going to necessitate quite a lot of checks at our borders.
And to what extent has the pandemic changed the calculations around Brexit, also the political calculations for reforming things inside the United Kingdom?
Well, it's changed a lot of things. One of the reasons why Liz Truss wrote that letter that was referred to earlier is because Michael Gove has said we're not going to have a functioning border in place by January because we've been distracted by the pandemic. We're going to phase it in over 6 months. So it's altered our Brexit preparations. The government is only now going to start trying to persuade businesses to take the steps they'll need to take to be ready. So in terms of Brexit, yes, the pandemic has had an impact. And in terms of the wider agenda as well, remember, Boris Johnson came to power talking about levelling up, talking about dealing with inequality. Then the pandemic hit. So you can hardly blame the Prime Minister for not having delivered because quite rightly, the government's attention has been firmly on the pandemic and on nothing else.
But in 10 seconds, they've also been spending an awful lot of money on these things, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the pandemic has necessitated spending on an eye-watering scale simply because of the potential scale of unemployment to come. The really difficult decisions will be in the future as to who pays for this and how that sort of burden is distributed amongst the British people.